Why was the jungle so quiet, right before it screamed? Thick vines tangled around the ankles of the night, the air wet and heavy enough to taste. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes checked his watch, 400 hours. His 12-man SEAL team had been moving for 3 hours through the Philippine jungle, shadows among shadows, closing in on what command called a minor hostage site. 15 hostiles, they'd said. Easy numbers, routine recon, in and out before dawn. But something felt wrong. Even the insects had stopped singing. Hayes raised a fist and the column froze. No one moved, not even to breathe. The jungle pressed in like a living thing, watching, waiting. He touched his throat mic and whispered, 200 meters to the compound. No engagement unless compromised. His men nodded silently. Each of them trusted the other with their lives. They'd done this 100 times before. What they didn't know was that someone else was already watching them. From nearly a kilometer away, through the soft blue glow of a thermal scope, Staff Sergeant Alina Voss tracked their movement. Her crosshairs swept across the jungle, following faint heat signatures hidden beneath the canopy. She'd been in position for 6 hours, barely moving, her ghillie suit blending perfectly with the moss-covered ridge. The humidity clung to her skin, and she could feel each heartbeat against the rifle stock pressed to her shoulder. Her orders were clear, observation only. No engagement, no interference, just eyes on target. But she'd learned long ago that orders didn't always survive first contact with reality. Through her headset, she listened to the SEAL team's encrypted comms. Hayes's voice, calm, measured, carried across the static. Visual confirmation only, no contact. Then came the voice from command. Major Dennis Kovac, Tactical Operations Center, 30 kilometers away. His tone was crisp, clinical, the kind of voice that didn't bleed when men did. Sierra Actual, confirm progress. You're green to proceed. Intelligence stands at 15 hostiles. Hayes hesitated. Copy TOC, but thermal shows, he stopped, uncertain. His point man, Petty Officer Brennan, was counting heat signatures through his scope. 43, not 15. 43 armed men in defensive formation. Hayes exhaled slowly, keying his mic again. TOC, this is Sierra Actual. We're reading 4-3 hostiles, heavy weapons in 3 positions. Request abort. The reply came back fast, sharper this time. Negative, Sierra Actual. Your equipment's reading false contacts from atmospheric interference. Proceed to observation point. Hayes stared at the display again. The heat signatures pulsed like silent warnings. 43 red ghosts where there should have been 15. TOC, he said quietly, we're outnumbered 3-1. Request immediate exfil. A pause, then Kovac's voice, colder now. Mission stands, Lieutenant, do not abort. Somewhere on her ridge, Alina Voss blinked through the scope, her finger resting just above the trigger guard. She could hear every word through the command channel, and her gut told her the same thing Hayes was feeling. The intel was wrong, dangerously wrong. She shifted slightly, adjusting her sightline on the compound below. The heat map was alive with movement, sentries on patrol, guards shifting positions, too many rifles glinting in the darkness. She whispered to herself, 47, not 43. The number kept rising as her thermal feed caught movement deeper in the compound. Her training told her to report. Her instinct told her no one was listening. The SEALs crept closer, one step then another. The only sound was the rustle of gear against wet leaves and the faint hum of their comms. 50 meters from the compound, Brennan froze. His gloved hand shot up, movement. A single figure appeared at the tree line, a guard. Rifle slung, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. Hayes saw the moment their eyes met, 2 silhouettes, realizing they weren't alone. Then the jungle erupted. Automatic gunfire shredded the silence, muzzle flashes tearing through the night. The SEALs dove for cover behind logs and trees, returning controlled bursts of fire, but the volume coming at them was overwhelming, 3 directions at once, coordinated, precise. not an ambush by chance. A trap. Hayes hit the ground hard, bark exploding beside his head as rounds ripped into the tree. He keyed his radio. TOC, troops in contact. One wounded, request QRF, immediate air support. He waited. The firefight raged. Bullets tore through leaves like insects gone mad. Then Kavek's voice returned, calm, almost bored. QRF 45 minutes out. Air support unavailable due to weather complications. Maintain defensive posture. Hayes stared at his radio in disbelief. Weather complications. He could hear thunder, but it was miles away. Above him, the stars were clear. He looked around at his men, Reeves, the corpsman, crawling toward Torres, who was clutching a bleeding shoulder. Richardson firing from behind a fallen log until his rifle clicked empty. They were already taking casualties, and the enemy was closing. From her ridge, Elena Voss watched it all unfold through her scope. Her stomach tightened as she saw the perimeter shrink, bright red heat signatures pressing inward like a tightening noose. She keyed her mic to Kavek. TOC, Overwatch 7. I have visual on enemy force, 47 hostiles, 3 fixed, 1 mobile. Recommend immediate mission abort. Static, then Kavek's voice dismissive. Maintain observation only, Overwatch 7. Do not interfere. She bit her lip, anger rising. Sir, I'm confirming flanking movement north of the SEAL position. They're seconds from being surrounded. Overwatch 7, Kavek snapped. Your reconnaissance only, do not engage, that's a direct order. Voss looked through her scope, a dozen heat signatures fanning out, forming a semicircle around the unaware SEALs. If they closed that distance, it would be over. She thought of Hayes's voice, calm but strained, and the men huddled behind shattered trees, fighting to breathe between gunfire bursts. Somewhere deep inside her, a decision began to form. Not loud, not sudden, just inevitable. She switched frequencies. Sierra Actual, Overwatch 7, she said softly. You've got a hostile element flanking your 6, 40 meters, 12 fighters, marking position now. A beat of silence. Then Hayes's voice, low and urgent. Copy, Overwatch 7, adjusting position, thank you. From the TOC, Kavek's fury came through immediately. Overwatch 7, you just violated a direct order. Cease transmissions immediately or you will face formal charges. Voss didn't answer. Through her scope, she saw the flanking group reach attack distance, rifles raised, preparing to fire. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Every rule drilled into her screamed, don't do it. Then she saw one of the SEALs, barely 25, drag a wounded teammate behind a log, bullets tearing the ground around them. She flipped the safety off. Sierra Actual, she whispered. Overwatch engaging northern threat. Keep your heads down. The shot cracked across the jungle, a sound clean and final. The hostile squad leader dropped where he stood, his body a collapsing outline of heat through her scope. She cycled the bolt, fired again and again. Down below, the SEALs heard the strange rhythm of her shots, single, precise, deliberate. And with each one, the incoming fire slowed. The northern flank dissolved into confusion. Fighters scrambled, shouting in panic, unable to locate the invisible hand cutting through their ranks. Hayes's head snapped toward the sound. Somewhere out there, beyond the trees, a sniper was rewriting their odds. For the first time in 10 minutes, the line held. He keyed his mic again, voice rough with exhaustion. Overwatch 7, whoever you are, keep doing what you're doing. Voss said nothing. Her world had narrowed to the scope, the trigger, the faint rhythm of her breathing. 800 meters away, 12 men's lives hung on her aim. Each shot was a heartbeat, each target a choice she could never take back. She didn't look away when the last of the northern fighters fell. She couldn't afford to. The eastern group was shifting now, trying to regain momentum. She pivoted slightly, adjusted for wind, and fired again. 3 rounds, 3 hostiles down. Her radio buzzed. Kavek again. Overwatch 7, cease fire immediately. You are not authorized to engage. Voss's reply was simple, her voice steady. Engaging hostile forces threatening friendly element. Another shot, another man down. Below, Hayes was moving his wounded, consolidating ammo, trying to buy time. His team was battered, running dry, but alive, because somewhere out there, a single rifle was holding the line. In the TOC, Kovac's voice rose. Overwatch 7, acknowledge my last transmission. You are in direct violation. The radio crackled, then went silent. Voss adjusted her scope and whispered to no one, not anymore. The jungle quieted, save for the echo of her last shot. Smoke drifted between the trees. For the SEALs, the fight wasn't over, but something had shifted. Hope had a sound now. It sounded like a sniper's heartbeat at 800 meters. And somewhere on that ridge, Alina Voss finally exhaled. She'd broken every rule that kept her career safe. But as the static cleared and Hayes's strained voice came through, 12 still standing, thanks to you, she realized she'd kept something far more important alive. Her humanity. How long could 12 men fight before hope ran out? The jungle burned in silence now, smoke curling upward from shattered trees and torn earth. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes pressed his back to a trunk slick with mud and blood, his breathing shallow. The gunfire had faded to scattered bursts, the kind that came when attackers weren't sure if they were still winning. Across the perimeter, the SEALs whispered ammo counts. Last mag. 2 left. Nothing in reserve. Their voices trembled with exhaustion, not fear. Fear had burned away already. Hayes checked on his wounded, Torres propped against a log, bandaged shoulder bleeding through. Richardson pale from a leg wound that wouldn't stop leaking red. The corpsman, Reeves, worked by feel more than light, his gloves slick. The men were alive, barely, and that meant they still had something to fight for. Above them, a single rifle cracked again, distant, measured. The sound came like punctuation between heartbeats. Overwatch 7. Whoever she was, she changed everything. Hayes clicked his radio. Overwatch 7, Sierra Actual. You've saved our skin twice over. What's your sitrep? Her voice came quiet, composed, almost too calm for what she'd just done. Position secure. Northern flank neutralized. Hostile strength reduced. You'll hold. Something in the tone told him she wasn't asking permission anymore. She was telling him what came next. Hayes smiled grimly, wiping blood from his face. Copy that, we'll hold. Inside her ghillie suit, Alina Voss adjusted her rifle's bipod. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline refusing to leave. Her scope glowed faintly against her cheek, the thermal overlay painting the jungle in bright ghosts of red and gold. Every movement meant potential death. But for the first time tonight, the odds had shifted. Her radio hissed Kovac again, his voice sharp as glass. Overwatch 7, this is TOC. You will cease fire immediately. That's an order. Acknowledge. She closed her eyes for half a second. Orders. Always the same tone. The same arrogance from men who'd never heard a bullet pass their head. She opened the channel. Negative TOC. Engaging hostiles threatening friendly forces. Sierra Actual is combat ineffective. QRF still 30 minutes out. The reply came so fast it cut her off. You are out of line, Staff Sergeant. You will stop firing or face court-martial upon return to base. She let the static swallow his voice. There were 19 hostiles still breathing out there. She could hear them, faint chatter, shifting metal, boots scraping. She didn't have time for bureaucrats. Her finger slid back to the trigger. Through the sight, a figure moved between trees, cautious, testing her reach. 800 meters, crosswind 2 knots. She adjusted half a mil left and squeezed. The shot cracked clean. The heat signature dropped. Another moved, another shot. Each one was a heartbeat closer to survival for the men below. Hayes's voice cut through again, low and rough. Overwatch 7, we're consolidating. Wounded stable for now. You still got eyes on us. Always, she said softly. Stay low. Movement north, 2 fighters trying to flank your right. Copy? He signaled his team, shifting positions without hesitation. He didn't question her. In war, trust was earned by results, not rank. From the command center 30 kilometers away, Major Dennis Kovac stood over a bank of monitors, jaw tight. The tactical feeds showed nothing but flickering icons, data he controlled. Numbers, not faces. He hated losing control. An aide leaned in. Sir, the sniper's comms are still active. She's engaging targets. Kovac's eyes narrowed. Patch me through. Static filled the room. Overwatch 7, he snapped. You're disobeying direct orders. Do you understand what that means? Alina paused mid-breath, the crosshairs steady on her next target. She spoke quietly, more to herself than to him. Yeah, Major, it means 12 men might live. She fired again. The round found its mark. Another hostile went down. Below, Hayes crouched beside Brennan, who was watching the tree line through the smoke. Sir, Brennan said, whoever that sniper is, she's not supposed to be here, is she? Hayes shook his head. Doesn't matter anymore. She's the only thing keeping us alive. Then we follow her lead. The decision wasn't tactical, it was human. The chain of command was broken out here, replaced by something older, purer. Survival, trust. Rounds cracked from the east. Hayes returned fire, short controlled bursts. His rifle locked back. Empty. He swapped magazines, his last one, and kept firing. If this was the end, he wasn't giving it away easy. Through the chaos, another voice joined the frequency, one no one expected. Joint Operations Center, this is Captain Sarah Chun. Sierra Actual, report status directly. Do not route through TOC. Hayes blinked, surprised. Ma'am, 3 casualties, low ammo, engaged by multiple hostiles. Correction, were engaged. Unknown sniper call sign Overwatch 7 providing overwatch and suppressing enemy. She's the only reason we're breathing. Captain Chun's voice stayed level. Copy that, Lieutenant. Stand by. You'll have air in 12 minutes. Weather's clear. Repeat, weather is clear. Hayes looked up, confused. Kovac had said weather grounded air support. He keyed the mic again. Say again. TOC reported heavy weather at Ford Airfield. That's false, Lieutenant, Chun replied, her tone tightening. Airfield reports clear skies. We're launching a Apache now. Hayes didn't smile often, but he did then. He looked toward the ridge line and whispered, You hear that, Overwatch? Voss's voice came back faintly calm. Copy. I'll keep them off you till they arrive. Her rifle cracked again. Each round measured, each target falling like punctuation marks in a story she refused to let end in tragedy. 10 minutes later, the low growl of rotor blades rolled across the treetops. The Apache broke through the haze, searchlights cutting the night. Hayes lifted a smoke grenade, popped it, red plume marking their position. The helicopter banked hard, cannons roaring to life. The jungle lit up as tracer rounds tore through hostile positions. The sound was deafening, salvation screaming from the sky. Voss stayed on her scope, tracking heat signatures scattering in panic. The fight was over in seconds. What was once an organized ambush turned into a rout. The jungle went quiet again, this time, truly quiet. Hayes keyed his mic, his voice hoarse but alive. Overwatch 7, whoever you are, thank you. Voss didn't answer right away. She was watching the last of the hostiles fade into the dark, her crosshairs following one before lowering the rifle. Her breathing slowed. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost reflective. Sierra Actual, 12 still standing, that's enough for me. She shut her comms and let the silence return. For the first time in hours, she felt the tremor in her hands. She flexed her fingers, grounding herself against the rifle stock. The jungle smelled of cordite and rain. She thought about the line she'd just crossed, one she could never step back from. Orders broken. Career destroyed. but in exchange 12 men breathing. That felt like a trade she could live with. She packed her gear, slow and deliberate. The world around her felt heavier now, as if it knew what she'd done, what she'd risked. The ridge gave her a view of the clearing below. The SEALs were moving the wounded toward the extraction zone, the helicopter hovering nearby with its landing lights strobing through the smoke. She could see Hayes turn, scanning the ridge, maybe looking for her. He couldn't see her, he wouldn't, not yet. She whispered, "You're safe now, that's all that matters." Then she disappeared into the trees. At the operations center, Kovac stood rigid, watching the feed from the Apache gun camera. The hostiles were gone, the SEALs were alive, and none of it matched his narrative. He turned on his aide. "Who authorized that airstrike?" "Captain Chun, sir, Joint Operations." Kovac's face hardened. "She overstepped her authority, so did that sniper. I want both on report." "Sir," the aide said quietly, "if they hadn't." Kovac slammed a hand against the console. "That's not the point. They violated command structure. Protocol matters." Outside the TOC, the night was still. Inside, the air was thick with ego and denial. Kovac didn't see the lives saved. He only saw his authority challenged. By dawn, the jungle was quiet except for the thump of medevac rotors. Hayes stood near the clearing, helmet off, his face streaked with grime. He watched Torres and Richardson being loaded onto stretchers, alive but battered. The sun was rising, a new day that almost didn't exist for them. He looked toward the ridge again. Still nothing. No movement, just the faint glint of light on glass far away. He raised a hand, unsure if anyone was watching. "Whoever you are," he said quietly, "you did right." Up on that ridge, hidden by leaves and distance, Alina Voss watched through her scope one last time. The team was safe. The helicopters lifted off, carrying them away. She exhaled and finally allowed herself to whisper the truth she'd been holding inside all night. "I broke orders, but I didn't break faith." The jungle wind answered her with silence. Back at base, hours later, the fallout began. Kovac stormed into the communications office, demanding transcripts, data logs, every word Voss had transmitted. His report was already forming in his mind: insubordination, unauthorized engagement, violation of direct orders. He didn't write about the men she saved. Alina Voss returned to base under a gray dawn, her ghillie suit still wet from dew, her eyes hollow but steady. The MP at the landing pad looked at her like he'd heard rumors. Everyone had. Word spread fast when someone broke the rules, even faster when breaking them worked. "Staff Sergeant Voss," he said, "Colonel Brennan wants to see you, now." She nodded, no fear in her face, just quiet acceptance. She made her choice long before the first shot. As she walked across the tarmac, helicopters buzzed overhead, carrying men she'd never meet, men who'd live because of her. The base air smelled like oil and dust and sunrise, the kind of smell you remembered when you were about to lose something. Voss whispered under her breath, barely audible. "Sometimes the right thing looks like mutiny, until morning proves it was." She squared her shoulders and walked toward judgment. What happens when doing the right thing looks exactly like betrayal? The rotor wash was still whipping dust across the tarmac when Staff Sergeant Alina Voss stepped off the helicopter. Her ghillie suit hung loose, streaked with mud and shredded leaves, blending her into nothing. She should have felt relief, the kind that comes after surviving the unthinkable. Instead, she felt the weight of what came next. 2 military police officers waited beside the landing pad. One of them looked barely old enough to shave. His posture was stiff, his expression unreadable. "Staff Sergeant," he said, "you're to report directly to Colonel Brennan's office. Now." No cuffs, no formal arrest, not yet. That small mercy told her something. The storm hadn't hit, but it was coming. She nodded, understood. As she walked across the compound, the world seemed sharper, louder. Boots on gravel, distant radio chatter, the smell of fuel and gun oil. Everything normal routine except she no longer was. She crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She hadn't just fired rounds. She'd fired a message straight through the heart of military order. And everyone knew it. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, Major Dennis Kovac stood over his desk, flanked by two aides. His voice was clipped, his words surgical. Compile every transmission she made. Timestamp it. I want 3 copies ready for the investigation. His aide hesitated. Sir, the SEAL team's report. Kovac cut him off. I don't care about their report. She violated orders. This isn't about the outcome. It's about discipline. He leaned over the console, his reflection staring back from the glass. They need to know what happens when people think they can rewrite the chain of command. He didn't realize that somewhere above him, the chain he thought he owned was already fraying. In another building, Captain Sarah Chun sat at a dimly lit operations desk, reviewing radio logs. Her eyes flicked across each line of text, each timestamp. The pattern was clear. Hayes had reported 43 hostiles. Kovac had denied it. Then Voss's transmissions began, warnings ignored, orders defied, and a rescue that shouldn't have been possible. Chun exhaled slowly. He almost got them all killed. Her junior officer looked up. Ma'am. She pointed at the screen. Major Kovac. He denied every request for support. The sniper saved 12 lives and now he's charging her with insubordination. The officer hesitated. That's career suicide for her, isn't it? Chun's jaw tightened. Not if I can help it. Voss stood outside Colonel Brennan's office, waiting for the signal to enter. The hallway felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before judgment. Her hands hung at her sides, still faintly trembling from adrenaline she hadn't burned off. The secretary's voice broke the silence. Colonel will see you now. She stepped inside. Brennan was standing by the window, backlit by the rising sun. The man's uniform looked as sharp as his gaze. On the desk lay a thick folder, her name written on the cover. He didn't motion for her to sit, not yet. Staff Sergeant Voss, he began, his voice even. I've read the reports, I've listened to the transmissions, and I've spoken with Major Kovac. His tone made it clear. Kovac's version had arrived first. He turned toward her. 3 separate orders to maintain reconnaissance only. You ignored all 3 and engaged hostiles without authorization. You understand the gravity of that. Yes, sir, she said. He studied her face. Why? The question wasn't hostile. It was quiet, genuine, but it hit like a round. Voss took a breath. Because 12 men were about to die, sir. They'd run out of ammo. They were surrounded. Command refused to believe the intel was wrong. I had a shot to stop it, so I took it. Knowing you face charges. Yes, sir. Knowing you might end your career. Yes, sir. The colonel's eyes softened, barely. And you're sure your decision saved those men? Voss didn't blink. 100%, sir. If I'd followed orders, I'd be writing their obituaries right now. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. Brennan finally nodded once, then gestured to the chair. Sit down, Sergeant. She obeyed, unsure if that was mercy or procedure. He opened the folder. Inside were printed comm logs, satellite images, and mission notes. Major Kovac has filed 4 charges against you. Violation of direct orders, unauthorized engagement, insubordination, and breach of radio discipline. Her throat tightened slightly. She kept her voice steady. Understood. Brennan flipped another page. However, I also have Lieutenant Hayes's debrief here. He reports that your intervention came 60 seconds before their position was overrun. That without your engagement, his entire team would have been killed. The colonel looked up. Were you aware of those odds? I didn't need the math, sir. I could see it. And you still engaged? Yes, sir. The colonel closed the folder and walked to the window again. Sunlight fell across his uniform, cutting a line between shadow and gold. He spoke without turning around. Major Kovac is a difficult man to deal with. He's convinced that order equals control. Sometimes he forgets that control doesn't win wars. People do. He turned back to her. You disobeyed a superior officer, Sergeant. That's undeniable. But you also saved 12 Americans. That's undeniable too. I need to decide which truth matters more. Voss didn't move. Sir, I'll accept whatever comes. Brennan studied her for a long moment, the steady posture, the lack of defense in her eyes. He nodded once. Dismissed for now. You'll remain on base until the inquiry convenes. She rose, saluted, and left the office without a word. Behind her, Brennan looked down at Kovac's report, dense paragraphs of regulation and accusation. Then at Hayes's statement, 2 lines written in blunt handwriting. She saved us, that's the whole story. The colonel exhaled through his nose. Somewhere between those 2 documents, the truth waited. Voss walked out into the sunlight, feeling its warmth for the first time in days. She should have felt lighter. Instead, guilt tangled with resolve. She'd done what was right, but right came with consequences. She walked past rows of soldiers who'd heard the rumors. Some nodded subtly. Some looked away. To some she was a hero, to others a cautionary tale. She didn't care which version they believed. Not yet. At the far end of the compound, the medical tents fluttered in the wind. She stopped when she saw them, the SEAL team. Hayes, Brennan, Reeves, Torres in a sling, Richardson on crutches. 12 men, battered but breathing. They turned when they saw her. The moment stretched, quiet, awkward, heavy with gratitude words couldn't cover. Hayes broke the silence first. You must be Overwatch 7. She nodded once. Staff Sergeant Elena Voss. Hayes stepped forward and extended his hand. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, we owe you everything. She shook his hand, firm, professional, but there was warmth there too. He smiled faintly. You probably broke every rule in the book. I might have rewritten 1 or 2, she said. The team chuckled softly. The sound felt human again, fragile but real. Hayes's tone turned serious. I heard Kovac's filing charges. If he does, my whole team's testifying. We'll make sure the truth on record. Voss's gaze softened. You don't owe me that. Maybe not, he said, but we owe you our lives, seems fair. Behind him, Torres called out, voice rough but teasing. Next time, Sergeant, try showing up 5 minutes earlier. My shoulder's still mad about it. Voss smiled, the first genuine one in days. No promises. That night in her quarters, she sat at her small desk, the sound of ceiling fans humming above. The rifle lay disassembled beside her, the metal gleaming faintly in the lamplight. She cleaned it slowly, ritual more than necessity. Each motion steadied her heartbeat. The weapon wasn't just a tool. It was memory, weight, consequence. When she was done, she sat back and whispered to the empty room. Dad, you told me once, orders make soldiers, choices make humans. I think I finally understand what you meant. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. She closed her eyes, letting the silence swallow it. At the same hour, Captain Chun stood in Colonel Brennan's office, holding a tablet filled with data. Sir, I've compiled a preliminary analysis of the mission, she said. Hayes's thermal data, Voss's reports, the airfield logs, everything points to one thing. Kovac's intelligence was wrong from the start, critically wrong. Brennan leaned forward, define critically. She swiped the tablet, displaying overlapping heat maps. Intelligence said 15 hostiles. The SEALs confirmed 43. Voss recorded 47. Satellite imagery confirms at least 45. The enemy had fortified positions, crew-served weapons, not an insurgent camp, sir. A trained force. The colonel's jaw tightened, and Kovac dismissed every one of those reports. Yes, sir, he claimed atmospheric interference. Brennan's tone hardened. He risked 12 lives to protect his assessment. Chun nodded. I believe so, sir. This isn't the first time. I've been digging into his operational history. There are patterns, similar discrepancies in previous missions, high casualty ratios, command friction. Brennan leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. Document everything. We're not dealing with one bad call. We're dealing with a man who can't admit when he's wrong. Chun nodded, voice steady but weighted. And a woman who refused to let his pride kill her people. The colonel looked out the window toward the horizon, the sky fading to deep amber. Sometimes, he said softly, the hardest part of command is knowing when disobedience isn't defiance, it's courage. That night Alina lay awake, eyes open in the dark. The echoes of the firefight still lived in her head, the smell of cordite, the sound of men screaming for ammo, the calm, mechanical rhythm of her shots. She thought about Kavek's voice, cold, absolute, telling her to stop. She thought about the silence that would have followed if she had. She rolled onto her side and whispered into the dark. Would I do it again? The answer came before she finished asking. Yes. And in that whisper lay both her peace and her sentence. How do you defend yourself when the truth itself is on trial? The inquiry room was windowless, 4 gray walls, 1 metal table, 2 chairs, and a single overhead light that hummed like it wanted to speak. Staff Sergeant Alina Voss sat with her hands folded, the skin across her knuckles still rough from the jungle. Across from her sat Major Dennis Kavek, eyes sharp, mouth drawn tight. Between them lay a recorder, blinking red. Colonel Brennan entered last. He didn't sit. He stood behind the chair meant for Kavek, hands clasped behind his back. This inquiry is to determine whether Staff Sergeant Voss violated direct orders during Operation Serrated Edge, he said evenly. Major Kavek, proceed. Kavek pressed the button on the recorder. His tone dripped authority. Staff Sergeant, let's keep this simple. You were ordered to maintain observation only, correct? Yes, sir. And yet you discharged your weapon multiple times, engaged targets, and interfered with an active SEAL operation, correct? I engaged hostiles threatening friendly forces. Kavek leaned forward. That wasn't the question. She held his gaze. Then ask the right one, sir. The colonel's eyes flicked up, catching the tension like static in the air. Kavek's nostrils flared, but he continued. You cost this command its integrity. You undermined authority. Voss's voice stayed calm, almost soft. No, sir. I refuse to let authority kill good men. The silence that followed felt dangerous, too quiet, too honest. Kavek smirked. You think heroics excuse disobedience? She didn't blink. No, I think humanity does. The colonel's hand lifted slightly, signaling enough. That's sufficient for now. He looked at her, not as a soldier under fire, but as someone who'd carried more than her share. You're dismissed, Sergeant. Remain available for further questioning. She stood, saluted, and walked out, the door clicking softly behind her. Kavek turned on Brennan. You can't let this stand, sir. She made a spectacle out of defiance. If word spreads, every recon sniper will think they can freelance missions. Brennan didn't answer right away. He looked at Kavek like he was studying a specimen. You ever wonder, Major, what kind of leader men follow into hell and back? Kavek frowned, sir. The kind who earns their trust, not the kind who hides behind orders. Brennan left him with that, the echo of his boots the only sound in the room. Outside, Captain Sarah Chun waited for Voss at the end of the corridor. She'd been standing there long enough to learn patience and to read faces. Voss looked drained but composed. Rough room, Chun asked quietly. More like predictable, Voss said. He's already written the ending, I just haven't read it yet. Chun's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Maybe the ending's not his to write. They walked together toward the open air of the motor pool. Soldiers moved around them, busy with normal life, fueling trucks, stacking crates, laughing too loudly. The world kept turning, even when yours stopped. Chun stopped beside a jeep. Listen, I've been digging through Kavak's records. He's made similar calls before, denied air support, dismissed intel, cost people lives. But no one ever challenged him because his paperwork's spotless. You gave me something real, proof he can be wrong. Voss leaned against the jeep, arms crossed. You sure you want to do this? Men like him don't go quietly. Chun looked toward the horizon. Neither do women like us. That night the base fell quiet. Voss sat on the edge of her bunk, boots still on, staring at the floor. Her rifle lay locked away now, evidence, technically. She felt strange without it, like missing a limb. She pulled a folded photo from her pocket, her father, years younger in desert fatigues, squinting into sunlight. On the back his handwriting, never forget who you serve. It's not the flag, it's the people beneath it. She whispered, I didn't forget Dad, they just did. The lights outside flickered as a storm rolled in, thunder grumbling like distant artillery. In the command offices, Brennan reviewed new files from Captain Chun, field reports, airfield weather data, thermal imagery, and transcripts. It was all there, proof that Kavak's intel had been wrong, his decision reckless. Brennan rubbed a hand across his face. He'd spent 30 years in uniform. He'd seen men punished for less and heroes buried for more. The machine of command never liked gray. It liked black and white. But tonight he couldn't find either. He clicked the comm line. Captain Chun, report to my office. When she arrived, soaked from rain, he handed her the folder. You realize what you're bringing me? Yes, sir, the truth. He nodded slowly. And you realize what happens when the truth makes senior officers look incompetent. Her jaw set, they try to bury it. He studied her, then smiled faintly, the tired smile of a man who'd stopped believing in miracles, then met two of them. Let's make sure this one stays above ground. The next morning, word spread faster than orders. The SEAL team had submitted a joint statement, 12 signatures, each line the same message. Overwatch 7 acted in defense of friendly forces. Her intervention prevented total loss of life. Her judgment was sound. By noon, the report hit Brennan's desk. By 2, it was on the general's. Kavak's reaction was volcanic. He stormed into the briefing room, eyes wild. They're insubordinate. They're undermining command authority. Brennan didn't raise his voice. They're telling the truth, Major. Kavak jabbed a finger toward him. You're siding with her because she got lucky. She's reckless, emotional. Brennan's tone cut like steel. She's alive, and so are they. That's not luck, that's leadership. Kavak stood there, chest heaving. The room went still. For the first time, he realized the weight of the silence around him wasn't respect, it was distance. He was alone, and everyone knew it. He left without another word. That evening, Voss was summoned again, this time not to an inquiry but to the parade ground. The sun hung low, painting the base in gold. She saw Colonel Brennan, Captain Chun, and Lieutenant Hayes waiting. No one spoke as she approached. The silence felt ceremonial, reverent. Brennan handed her a single sheet of paper. Effective immediately, all charges are dropped. The board found no misconduct. Your record remains intact. Voss read the words once, twice. Relief didn't come the way she expected. It wasn't joy. It was exhaustion, deep, quiet, human. She looked up. Thank you, sir. Brennan's expression softened. Don't thank me. Thank the men who refused to let the truth die in silence. Hayes stepped forward, offering a small grin. Told you we'd back you up. For the first time she laughed short, genuine. Guess I owe you a round. Make it 2, Torres called from behind him, his arm still in a sling. Even Brennan chuckled. Dismissed, Sergeant, and take some time off before the next storm finds you. She saluted, the motion crisp, and walked toward the fading light. But peace never lasts long in places built on war. That night Captain Chun found a sealed envelope on her desk, no name, just the military insignia embossed on the flap. Inside, a single classified order signed by Major Kovac. Transfer of Staff Sergeant Elena Voss to Forward Observation Unit 9, Active Conflict Zone, Eastern Mindanao. It wasn't punishment on paper, but everyone in uniform knew what it meant: exile through duty, a place where mistakes disappeared, and sometimes so did people. Chun read it twice, her stomach turning cold. She stood, walked straight to Colonel Brennan's quarters, and knocked. When he opened the door, she handed him the paper. He read it once, then sighed, long tired. He's making his move before the dust settles. Chun nodded. He wants her gone before the story spreads. Brennan set the paper on his desk, staring at it like a coiled snake. He's not going to win this one, not this way. At dawn, Elena Voss stood alone on the runway, duffel over her shoulder. The sky was gray again, always gray before another mission. She knew about the transfer. She hadn't fought it. Part of her believed she deserved it. Another part knew this was how the military said thank you when your conscience embarrassed them. She turned when she heard footsteps. Captain Chun approached, her coat flapping in the wind. "They shouldn't be sending you out again," Chun said quietly. Voss gave a half-smile. "I'm a sniper, Captain. Being alone in dangerous places is kind of my thing." Chun's expression tightened. "Just come back." Voss nodded. "I always do, eventually." They shook hands, firm, unspoken understanding passing between them. As the transport plane's engines roared to life, Voss climbed aboard. She looked out the window once, the base shrinking below, the runway turning to a line that led nowhere and everywhere at once. Inside her chest, the same calm that had steadied her trigger hand settled again. Somewhere down there, men she'd saved were laughing over beers. Somewhere else, Kovac was burning paperwork, pretending control still meant power. And up here in the thin, quiet air, Elena Voss felt neither punished nor redeemed, just alive, carrying the weight that came with both. The narrator's voice would lower here, softer, reflective. In war, not every victory is rewarded, and not every defiance is forgiven. But sometimes, the right thing doesn't need applause, just the courage to be done. And for Elena Voss, that courage had no off switch. What do you do when the war follows you, even after you've left the battlefield? The heat in Mindanao was different, heavier, almost personal. It clung to the skin like regret that refused to fade. Staff Sergeant Elena Voss stepped off the C-130 transport and into a wall of humidity that smelled of diesel and rain. Around her, the small forward base looked like it had been stitched together out of rust and stubbornness: tin roofs, dirt runways, the faint buzz of distant rotors. A corporal met her at the landing strip, clipboard in hand. "Staff Sergeant Voss, welcome to Fob 9. You're attached to Recon Detachment Echo, reporting to Captain Adrian Malik." Voss nodded. "Where do I find him?" "Ops tent, ma'am. Follow the sound of cursing." He wasn't kidding. Inside the operations tent, maps hung from every wall, half covered with notes and grease pencil scribbles. Radios hissed and popped with static. In the middle of it all stood Captain Adrian Malik, tall, lean, with a face carved from too many sleepless nights. He looked up as she entered, eyes assessing in an instant. "Staff Sergeant Voss," she said, saluting. He returned it. "So you're the infamous sniper who tells majors to shove their orders. Didn't think they'd send you here, of all places." Voss's tone stayed calm. "I go where I'm sent, sir." Malik smirked just barely. "That's the problem, you actually mean it." He gestured to a chair beside the map table. "We'll skip the small talk. The situation here's ugly. Local insurgents have been hitting villages in the river valleys. Intel says they're being funded, maybe trained, by a foreign militia group. We've lost 2 patrols in the last month. No survivors." He pointed at the red excess on the map. "We need eyes in that jungle. Quiet eyes. You'll be operating alone, Overwatch position on Ridge 4, covering a humanitarian convoy moving through the valley tomorrow. She studied the map. The route twisted through dense terrain perfect for ambushes. What's the convoy carrying? Medical supplies, and unofficially a local contact who's been passing us intel. If she's caught, the whole network burns. Voss looked up. So this isn't about supplies. Malik met her gaze. Nothing out here ever is. He handed her a sealed folder. Mission details, comm frequencies, extraction code. You deploy at 400. You'll be our eyes, Voss, and maybe the reason any of us make it out of here. She nodded once, tucked the folder under her arm, and left the tent. Outside, the rain began again, thick, tropical, relentless. She looked up at the gray sky and let it soak into her face. Somewhere between drops, she could almost hear her father's voice again. The jungle's not your enemy. It's the mirror that shows who you really are. She whispered back, guess I'll find out again. By dawn, she was gone. Her boots sank into the wet mud, the world shrinking to the rhythm of her breath and the weight of her pack. Every step through that jungle felt like walking through memory, the smell, the silence, the constant tension between beauty and danger. Ridge 4 was 2 clicks east of the convoy route, high ground with perfect sightlines. She reached it just after sunrise, crawling the last 20 meters to avoid silhouetting herself against the ridge line. Her ghillie suit was streaked with dark mud and fern fronds, turning her into another piece of the landscape. She assembled her rifle, checked wind direction, and sighted in. The world narrowed into a circle of glass and breath. Below, the convoy began its slow crawl through the valley, 3 trucks, 1 armored Humvee in front, and a handful of soldiers walking alongside. To anyone else, it looked routine. To Voss, it looked like bait. She whispered into her mic, Overwatch in position. Captain Malik's voice crackled back. Copy, Overwatch. Convoy proceeding as planned. Stay alert, we've got reports of movement north of your sector. Understood. She settled deeper into the earth. Hours passed. Sweat stung her eyes. The jungle hummed with invisible life, insects, distant birds, the sound of her own pulse. She learned to listen for what didn't belong. The jungle was honest that way. It always told you when something was off. At 10:43 hours, it did. A small sound, faint metal against stone, carried through the stillness. She froze, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. Then she saw it, a shimmer of light that didn't belong, glass, a scope. Malik, she whispered, we've got multiple hostiles, ridge northwest, sniper positions, at least 3. Confirm. She adjusted magnification. The heat signatures glowed faintly through the foliage. Confirmed. They're waiting for the convoy to hit the clearing. Engage at discretion, Malik said. Her breath slowed. She centered her crosshairs on the first glint. The shot broke the silence, clean, sharp. Through the scope, the hostile dropped. The jungle came alive. Automatic fire erupted from the opposite ridge, bullets shredding leaves, slamming into the dirt around the convoy. Soldiers dove for cover. Shouts filled the air. Voss shifted, tracking muzzle flashes through the trees. 1, 2, 3, she fired in rhythm, her rifle steady as a metronome. Each round was deliberate, each pause calculated. Overwatch, this is Malik, the radio barked. We're pinned down, multiple contacts closing from the riverbank. Copy, she said, eyes scanning. She caught movement at the river's edge, half-submerged fighters using the current as cover. Clever. She exhaled, adjusted for drop, and fired again. The river turned red in ripples. The firefight lasted 6 minutes. Then the jungle went quiet again, except for the ringing in her ears. Overwatch, Malik said, voice ragged, status. Clear, she replied. Convoy intact, casualties. 1 KIA, 2 wounded, you saved the rest. She didn't respond. She just watched as medics pulled bodies from the mud, the convoy crawling forward again, slower, quieter. When they were gone, she stayed still for a long time. the smell of gunpowder hanging in the rain. Sometimes victory didn't feel like survival, it felt like confession. That night back at base, Malik found her sitting alone outside the barracks, rifle across her knees, staring at nothing. He sat beside her, wordless for a moment. Hell of a day. She didn't look up. They were waiting for us, someone tipped them. He nodded slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. Inside the base. Maybe. This insurgent group's always one step ahead. Someone's feeding them intel. Voss turned her gaze toward him. Then we find out who. He studied her face, unreadable in the dim light. You really don't know when to stop, do you? I stop when it's over. Malik smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's been burned before. I have, she said simply. He didn't press. Soldiers didn't trade scars for sympathy, only for truth. Over the next week, she monitored comms traffic, patterns of movement, reports from field patrols. Something didn't add up. Each ambush the insurgents launched happened within 30 minutes of a convoy departure. That meant timing, inside knowledge. One night she caught a burst of encrypted chatter on a secondary frequency, one she hadn't been assigned. She decrypted it manually, her fingers moving from muscle memory. What she found made her blood go cold. A voice familiar. Convoy Delta departing 900, route confirmed, minimal escort, extract target near Ridge 4. She played it again. The voice wasn't local, it was American, and it wasn't just any voice. It was Major Dennis Kovac. Her pulse slowed, not from panic but from understanding. His transfer order hadn't been exile, it was containment. He'd buried her in the one place his deals wouldn't survive scrutiny. And now he was selling information to the enemy. She sat there, headset still on, the hum of static in her ears like distant thunder. The jungle outside the walls shifted in the wind, whispering its eternal truth. Nothing stays hidden forever. The next morning, she found Captain Malik in the operations tent. I know who's leaking intel, she said. He looked up, skeptical but curious. You'd better be certain before you throw that stone. I am. She placed the recorder on the table, pressed play. Kovac's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate, unmistakable. Malik's expression hardened. Where did you get this? Intercepted it myself, last night. He stared at the map, jaw clenched. If this is real, it's treason. It's real, she said quietly. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he looked at her with something between respect and fear. You know what happens if we take this up the chain, right? She nodded. They'll bury it and me. Then why tell me? Because the next convoy leaves in 12 hours, she said. And if we don't stop it, he'll kill more of our own. Malik rubbed a hand through his hair. You realize you're already on thin ice. She met his eyes, voice steady. Then let it break under the right weight. That night, as rain lashed against the tin roofs and the jungle roared with wind, Alina Voss cleaned her rifle again, each motion slow, deliberate, ritualistic. She checked her scope, adjusted her windage, and laid the weapon beside her like an old friend. She wasn't preparing for survival this time. She was preparing for justice. Because sometimes the war didn't end when the gunfire stopped. Sometimes it just changed uniforms. The narrator's voice would drop to a reflective whisper here. She thought she'd left her ghosts behind, but the truth had followed, and it wore the same insignia as the people she once trusted. And somewhere out there, a man who'd buried his sins under other people's graves was about to learn what happens when the quiet ones decide to speak. How far would you go to expose the truth, if it meant becoming the thing you were fighting against? The storm had passed by morning, but the air still carried its weight. Every sound in the jungle seemed sharper, more deliberate. Staff Sergeant Alina Voss crouched beside the convoy map, her finger tracing the route through the valley. Across from her, Captain Adrian Malik studied her face, searching for hesitation. There was none. Same convoy pattern as before, he said quietly. 3 trucks, 1 armored lead. Departure at 900. Voss nodded, and we let it happen. Malik frowned. That's your plan, just let them walk into another ambush. Not exactly, she said, sliding a second sheet of paper toward him, coded coordinates. I adjusted the convoy manifest. The route will look the same, but it diverts 2 clicks south, through the dry basin. If Kovac's feeding them intel, he'll pass along the old route. That's where we'll be waiting. Malik leaned back, processing. You're turning his betrayal into bait. Her voice stayed calm. Exactly. He hesitated. If we're wrong. She met his eyes. Then we'll both answer for it, but if we're right, this ends tonight. There was a silence between them, the kind that comes before choices that can't be undone. Finally, Malik exhaled. All right, let's catch a ghost. By mid-morning, the base moved like any other day. Trucks lined up. Radios crackled with logistics chatter. No one noticed that the convoy's cargo manifest had been rewritten by hand. No one saw Voss slip her rifle case into the rear vehicle under a canvas tarp. At 8:45 hours, she keyed her mic. Overwatch in transit, convoy rolling. The engines rumbled to life. The road ahead stretched into a gray horizon that smelled of wet soil and unfinished stories. For the first hour, nothing moved but rain and dust. The jungle on either side looked almost peaceful, green, endless, deceitful. Then at 1003 hours, Malik's voice came through. Overwatch, this is command. Intercepted chatter confirms enemy movement along the old route. About 40 fighters. You were right. Voss adjusted her headset. Copy. Maintain radio silence from here. We don't want him knowing we're listening. She shifted the convoy south at the fork, toward the dry basin, the decoy route. High above, a drone feed streamed back to Malik's monitor. The real convoy, the decoy, was empty, just armor and crates of sandbags. The fake intel Kovac had leaked was already pulling the enemy toward the wrong road. But the question still burned. Would Kovac show up to watch his own betrayal unfold? 2 kilometers away, hidden behind a curtain of jungle, Voss lay prone beneath her gilly veil. Her scope swept across the ridge line where she'd first spotted the insurgent snipers days before. The same terrain, the same ghosts. Through the glass she caught movement, a shimmer, a shape too clean to belong. A man in tactical gear, not local, with an American-issue headset pressed to his ear. He wasn't shooting. He was coordinating. Her breath slowed, her heart didn't. She whispered into her calm. Malik, I've got visual on a high-value contact. Not insurgent, American gear. He's running the op. Static, then Malik's voice low. Do you have confirmation? Voss adjusted focus. The man turned slightly, the light catching his face. It was Major Dennis Kovac. Her jaw tightened. Confirmed. Orders? Malik asked. She hesitated. Orders. The same word that had once chained her to silence. The same word that almost killed 12 men. She exhaled. We catch him alive. Down below, the jungle erupted, not with combat but confusion. The enemy fighters poured into the clearing along the old convoy route, expecting trucks and targets. Instead, they found empty road and silent hills. Then, from above, Malik's unit opened fire, controlled, deliberate bursts. The ambush had reversed. Voss kept her scope on Kovac, who stood frozen for half a heartbeat as he realized the trap had turned. He bolted toward the tree line, radio pressed to his mouth. She tracked him through her scope, adjusting for angle, distance, and wind. Her finger brushed the trigger not to kill, but to remind herself she could. Malik, she whispered. He's running northwest, heading toward extraction point Echo. Copy, our patrol's cutting him off. Hold overwatch. She watched as Kovac stumbled through the brush, sliding down the embankment toward the river. His radio fell, crackling with half-sentences. She couldn't hear them, but she didn't need to. She knew the tone, panic layered over pride. He was cornered by his own arrogance. 15 minutes later, the firefight died. The insurgents scattered, their leaders down, their ambush in ruins. Malik's voice came through again. Target secured. Voss exhaled, alive. Barely. He tried to draw on us, took a round to the leg. We've got him in custody. She didn't answer right away. Her rifle still tracked the scene, even as relief sank in slow. For months, Kavak had hidden behind authority, behind paperwork and signatures. Out here, none of that mattered. The jungle stripped men down to who they really were. And now, there was nothing left of his command, just a man bleeding into the dirt. They brought him back to base by nightfall. The medics worked in silence, patching his wound. He refused to look at anyone. Voss stood at the edge of the medical tent, rain dripping from her hair, her expression unreadable. Malik approached, handing her a mug of black coffee. "You want to talk to him?" he asked. She stared through the canvas toward the man inside. "I want to hear what he tells himself." When she stepped in, Kavak looked up from the cot, pale but defiant. His voice was weaker, but his arrogance hadn't bled out yet. "So this is your justice," he rasped, "dragging a superior officer into a jungle to make yourself feel righteous." Voss didn't move. "You sold intel to the enemy. Men died because of you." His laugh was dry. "You think you understand the bigger picture. Those enemies were intermediaries, controlled leaks, part of a sanctioned program. We feed them data, track the flow, learn their patterns. It's strategy." She took a slow step closer. "You mean it's justification, the kind that makes murder sound like math. You disobeyed orders once and thought it made you a savior," he spat. "You don't belong in this system, Voss. People like you are dangerous because you still think morality means something here." Her silence was sharper than any argument. After a long moment, she said softly, "Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's the only reason I can still look at myself." She turned to leave, then stopped. "You'll answer for this." He smiled faintly. "You'll never prove it." She looked back over her shoulder, her voice quiet but certain. "I already did." Outside the tent, Malik waited. "Anything?" "Enough," she said. He nodded. "Command's sending a transport for him tomorrow. Brennan's coming himself." At the sound of that name, something inside her eased. Brennan had been the only one who'd seen her not as a liability, but as proof that conscience could survive command. "Then it's almost over," she said. "Almost," Malik replied. But that night the camp didn't sleep easy. Voss sat under the awning outside her quarters, cleaning her rifle by lamplight. The rain came soft this time, whispering across the tin. She should have felt relief. Instead, unease settled in her chest. Something about Kavak's confidence bothered her. The way he'd said, "sanctioned program." The way he hadn't looked afraid, just waiting. She replayed his words in her mind. "You'll never prove it." She set the rifle down. The unease turned into motion. Inside the comms tent, she found the radio officer half asleep. "I need access to outgoing transmissions from the last hour," she said. He frowned. "Ma'am, that's restricted." "Now." He hesitated, then brought up the log. 3 outgoing bursts. 1 encrypted message, timestamped 15 minutes ago, priority clearance code, TOCKOVAC01. Her blood ran cold. She decrypted it manually. The message was short. "Confirm capture. Deploy count retrieval team at 200. No witnesses." She looked up at the clock. 1:32 hours. "Malik," she whispered into her mic, "we've got incoming. Hostile recovery team en route. ETA 25 minutes. Static, then his voice, low and steady. "How big?" "Unknown. But if Kavak called them, they won't come to negotiate." He swore under his breath. "All right, we go dark, prep defensive perimeter. No lights, no comms." Voss slung her rifle, adrenaline burning away fatigue. "Copy. I'll take Overwatch North Ridge." "Be careful, Alina." It was the first time he'd used her name. She smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. Always am. She reached the ridge as the last of the lights went out. The jungle was pitch black, except for the faint shimmer of lightning on the horizon. Through her scope, she scanned the tree line, then froze. Movement, shadows breaking formation, fanning out along the perimeter. 12, maybe 15. Night vision lenses glowed faintly like eyes in the dark. They were professionals, not insurgents, operators, clean gear, coordinated movement, Kavak's real insurance policy. She whispered into her mic, "They're here." "Copy," Malik said. "Hold fire till they breach visual range." The seconds stretched thin. The jungle pulsed with rain, breath, and tension. Then the first shot came, not hers. A muffled pop, silenced weapon. One of Malik's sentries dropped before he could even shout. "Contact," someone yelled. Voss fired once, twice. Two silhouettes collapsed in the brush. The ridge lit with flashes. Gunfire tore through the night. She moved positions, crawling through mud, counting her rounds. 10 shots left. 8. "Malik," she said between breaths, "they're trying to breach the western perimeter. Kavak must have given them coordinates." "Copy, we're holding east. Just keep them out." She smiled grimly. "That's the plan." Her next shot dropped the lead assaulter mid-stride. The jungle erupted with shouts, then silence. Rain swallowed the echoes. She wiped her scope clean with the edge of her sleeve, sighted again, nothing. No movement, just darkness and breath. For a moment, she wondered if it was over. Then she heard it, footsteps, too close. She spun, rifle raised. A shadow lunged. The impact threw her back against the mud. A knife flashed in the rain. She caught the wrist, twisted hard, pain lancing through her shoulder. The blade fell. She shoved him off, rolled, and fired point-blank. The body went still. Her heart hammered. Rain washed the blood from her face, leaving only exhaustion. She keyed her mic, voice low. "Perimeter secure for now." Malik exhaled on the other end. "Copy, we're still standing." Voss looked down at the body beside her. Clean gear, no insignia, no name. Just another ghost. "Tell Brennan to hurry," she said quietly. "Tomorrow might come too late." The narrator's voice fades softer here, layered over the sound of thunder. Truth doesn't die quietly. It fights back in shadows, in rain, in the silence between orders. And in that silence, Elena Voss stood her ground, one last time. What do you say when the dawn finds you alive, but you're not sure you should be? The first light broke through the jungle canopy, slicing gold into the gray rain. Staff Sergeant Elena Voss crouched beside a burned-out generator, rifle resting across her knees. The night's firefight had left the base quiet, too quiet. Smoke drifted low across the mud. Shell casings glinted like fallen stars. Captain Adrian Malik approached, limping slightly, his uniform streaked with ash. He held a radio handset in one hand. "Extraction birds are 20 minutes out," he said, his voice gravelly from shouting through the night. Voss nodded, eyes distant. "Casualties?" 3 dead, 5 wounded. We held the perimeter, but barely." She looked past him toward the medical tent. "And Kavak?" Malik exhaled. "Alive for now." Her jaw tightened. He was calling those men. Malik nodded. "Yeah, and now he gets to explain why." They stood in silence. Around them, soldiers moved like ghosts, dragging bodies, patching walls, refilling magazines they hoped they'd never need again. Finally, Malik said softly, "You saved us again." Voss shook her head. "No, I just didn't let them finish what he started." By the time Colonel Brennan's helicopter landed, the sun had burned away the last of the mist. The blades stirred up dust and smoke, scattering the smell of spent gunpowder into the morning air. He stepped out in full field uniform, eyes scanning the ruined perimeter. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice carried both authority and grief. "Report." Malik handed him a tablet with the night's data logs. Hostile force of at least 15. Tactical gear, suppressed weapons, clean comms. Not local insurgents, contract operators. They came for Kavak. Brennan's expression hardened and failed. Barely, Malik said. If not for her, he stopped, nodding toward Voss, who stood near the edge of the field, watching medics zip up body bags. Brennan followed his gaze. She seems to have a habit of saving people who shouldn't need saving. Malik's smile was tired. Maybe that's the problem. The system keeps giving her people who need saving. Brennan didn't answer. He started walking toward her. Voss didn't turn when he approached. She knew the sound of his boots, deliberate, grounded, not like the others. "Staff Sergeant," Brennan said quietly. "Sir?" He stopped beside her, looking out over the ridge where the jungle began again. "I read the report, and I heard the recordings you forwarded from Malik's intercept. Kavak's voice, the authorization codes, it's damning." "Is," she corrected, "not was." He glanced at her, faintly amused despite himself. Still the same stubborn sniper. She didn't smile. "He's been selling information, sir, probably longer than anyone wants to admit. Those operators weren't rogue, they were cleanup." Brennan's jaw tightened. "I know. Command confirmed a breach this morning. Someone up top had been running unsanctioned exchange programs, trading field data for intel favors. Kavak was the middleman." Voss's hands tightened around her rifle. "And now? He'll face a tribunal. This time, no one's protecting him." For a moment she said nothing. Then softly, "That won't bring them back." "No," Brennan said, "but it'll make sure fewer names get added to that list." He studied her face. There was exhaustion there, but something else too, the quiet defiance of someone who'd already accepted her place outside the chain of comfort. "You did what had to be done," he said, again. She looked at him, "and that's supposed to feel like victory." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, it's supposed to feel like truth. Sometimes that's the best we get." Later in the command tent, Kavak sat in restraints, wrists bound, face pale but eyes still burning with arrogance. The bandage around his leg was soaked through. He looked up as Brennan entered. "So this is what it looks like when the chain of command eats itself," Kavak said bitterly. Brennan stopped in front of him. "No, Major, this is what it looks like when the truth finally gets its turn." Kavak's laugh was low, hollow. "Truth? You think anyone up there cares about truth? You'll bury this like every other scandal. You'll write a neat report, call it a miscommunication, and file it under classified." Brennan's voice stayed calm. "Maybe, but not this time." He leaned forward, eyes level. "You made one mistake too many. You tried to clean your mess with other people's blood. And the woman you underestimated, she's the reason your name won't vanish quietly." Kavak's smirk faltered. Brennan straightened. "You'll be transferred to Manila under guard. After that, a tribunal. I doubt you'll see the outside of a cell again." As Brennan turned to leave, Kavak called after him. "You really think she's a hero? She disobeyed every rule in the book." Brennan paused. "So did you. The difference is she saved lives, you sold them." He left without another word. That night the camp was eerily still. No radio chatter, no drills. Just the distant hum of generators and the occasional crack of thunder over the hills. Voss sat alone by the fence line, cleaning her rifle not from necessity, but from habit. Each motion was quiet, meditative. Malik walked up carrying 2 tin mugs. He offered her one, coffee, burnt and bitter, the kind that meant you were still alive. "Brennan's leaving in the morning," Malik said. "He wanted me to tell you you're being recalled to base command. Debrief, evaluation, and possibly a commendation." Voss snorted softly. "For what? Surviving the mess they sent me into." Malik shrugged. "They call it valor, you call it stubbornness. Maybe it's both." She stared at the steaming mug for a moment. "They'll bury this, won't they?" He hesitated. "Some of it, maybe most of it, but not all truth needs headlines. Sometimes it just needs witnesses." She nodded slowly. And you? He smiled faintly. Still here. Someone's got to make sure this place doesn't eat itself alive. They sat in silence, watching the lightning dance across the clouds. Finally, she said quietly, you ever wonder if doing the right thing just makes everything harder? Malik took a sip. Every day. And he smiled, tired but certain, you do it anyway. When dawn came, the helicopter waited on the runway, the same model that had dropped her here weeks ago. She stood with her duffel slung over one shoulder, looking out over the jungle one last time. The air smelled of rain and smoke and something like closure. Captain Malik walked with her to the ramp. You ever think about staying out of the field for good? He asked. Every time I leave it, she said. He grinned. Figures. Brennan approached then, his presence steady as always. Staff Sergeant, he said, extending his hand. You've done more than any command could have asked for, and less than you deserved. She shook his hand. What happens now, sir? He looked toward the horizon. Now the paperwork starts, the reports, the hearings, the politics, but don't worry, this time you won't be standing alone. She nodded once. That'll be a first. As she climbed the ramp, Brennan called out, Voss. She turned. He said, you did right. Her reply was quiet but firm. That's the only way I know how. The engines roared to life. The ground fell away. The jungle shrank beneath her, but the ghosts didn't. They never did. At 10,000 feet, Voss leaned back against the cargo netting, eyes closed. The rhythmic thump of the rotors felt almost like a heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel it. Not pride, not triumph, but the fragile, trembling calm that comes after survival. She thought of Hayes and his team, of Malik, of Brennan, of the quiet moments between chaos that made all of it worth something. Then her mind drifted, uninvited, to the ones who hadn't made it. She whispered, I hope it was enough. No one heard her. Maybe that was how it was supposed to be. On the ground below, Malik watched the helicopter fade into the horizon. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. One Voss had left on his desk before boarding. Inside, a single note, handwritten in tight, careful script. Don't let silence become policy. He smiled faintly, folded it once, and tucked it into his jacket. Then he turned back toward the camp, where the generators hummed and soldiers moved through the motions of rebuilding. The jungle was already reclaiming its edges, swallowing the scars of battle. But some scars, the kind left on people, would take longer. Hours later in Manila, Brennan stood in a briefing room, handing over sealed evidence to the tribunal officers. Kovac was already in custody, his arrogance finally muted by the weight of consequences. When Brennan finished the paperwork, one of the officers asked, Do you think she'll come back? Brennan looked out the window at the rain starting again. People like Voss don't retire, he said. They just keep finding new battles to make right. He paused, almost to himself. Sometimes that's what salvation looks like in this line of work, not peace, just purpose. That night, as the sky deepened over the Pacific, Elena Voss sat on a cot inside a temporary barracks, the world finally still. Outside, the air smelled of wet concrete and jet fuel. She took out her father's photograph again, running her thumb across the worn corner. Guess I'm still trying to serve them, she whispered, the people beneath the flag. For the first time she smiled, small, tired but real. She lay back, the sound of distant planes filling the silence, and let her eyes close. The narrator's voice would fade in soft, reflective. Sometimes victory isn't loud. It's quiet, bruised breathing. It's a single heartbeat that refuses to stop when everything else says it should. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. How do you walk away from a war that still lives inside you? The debriefing room smelled of paper, coffee, and recycled air, a sterile contrast to the damp jungle Voss still carried in her skin. She sat alone at the metal table, uniform pressed, boots polished, her posture perfect but her eyes elsewhere. A young officer entered, tablet in hand. He couldn't have been older than 25. He cleared his throat nervously. Staff Sergeant Alina Voss, this is your final inquiry and psychological clearance. Colonel Brennan will join us shortly. Until then, I'll just ask a few standard questions. She nodded, go ahead. The officer tapped at his screen. Do you believe your recent actions in Mindanao were consistent with your training and orders? She thought for a long moment before answering. No, they weren't consistent with my training. He hesitated, unsure if that was a confession or philosophy. Then why take them? Her voice was calm, steady, because they were consistent with my conscience. He blinked, uncertain what box to check for that. Before he could ask another question, the door opened and Colonel Brennan stepped in, a folder under his arm. That'll be all, Lieutenant, he said quietly. I'll take it from here. The young officer nodded and left, grateful to escape the weight of something he didn't understand. Brennan set the folder down, took the chair across from her. For a moment he didn't speak. He just studied her, the composed exterior, the exhaustion behind the eyes. How are you sleeping? He finally asked. Voss gave a small, humorless smile. I've slept in worse places. My mind just hasn't caught up yet. He nodded. I know that feeling. He opened the folder, transcripts, mission reports, statements. The tribunal concluded their review this morning. Kovacs facing a full court-martial. Charges include espionage, unauthorized intelligence transfer, and conspiracy to obstruct command oversight. He's done. Voss didn't react. What about the people who helped him? We're still tracing it, Brennan said. There'll be fallout, there always is. Silence settled between them, not heavy but thoughtful. Finally, Brennan closed the folder. They're offering you reassignment, he said. Training Command, Quantico, instructing the next generation of recon snipers. She looked down at her hands. Desk job. Not exactly. Field mentorship. You'd be shaping the kind of soldiers who might one day save lives instead of taking them. Her voice was quiet, or end up like me. Brennan tilted his head. You make that sound like a bad thing. She met his eyes. It's not bad, it's just lonely. He leaned back thinking. Lonely's the tax on integrity. You've paid it in full. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Then softly, what happens if I say no? Then you walk away, he said. Honorable discharge, no reprimand, full benefits, clean record. You'll be free to disappear. The word disappear hung in the air like a question neither of them wanted to answer. Voss looked at the floor. And if I stay? Brennan's tone softened. Then you'll keep fighting battles that don't have names, but maybe you'll stop fighting them alone. She nodded slowly. I'll think about it. He stood, placing a small envelope on the table. Take your time. The system moves slower than it should, but sometimes it learns. When he left, she sat there in the silence, staring at the envelope. It had no markings, just her name in Brennan's handwriting. She didn't open it yet. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, familiar. That night she walked through the base alone. The sound of rain on corrugated metal was hypnotic. Soldiers hurried between barracks, their laughter echoing faintly through the corridors. For the first time, she wasn't part of it. She was the quiet observer again, the overwatch, but this time with no rifle in her hands. She stopped near the edge of the tarmac, where a transport plane idled under floodlights. Its engines rumbled low, ready for takeoff. She thought about how many times she'd climbed that ramp to war, to exile, to redemption. A shadow moved beside her. Captain Sarah Chun stepped out from behind a jeep, hands tucked in her pockets. Figured I'd find you here, Chun said. Voss smiled faintly. You always did have good intel. Chun's tone softened. I read the report. You did it, Alina. Kovacs finished. It's over. Voss looked out at the runway. It's never over, it just changes shape. Chun nodded slowly. Then what now? Voss was quiet for a moment. Brennan offered me Quantico teaching. That's not a bad thing. I know, but she hesitated. I'm not sure I know how to teach what I am. Chun's gaze was steady. Then don't teach them what to be, teach them why. The words hung there, simple and true. Voss smiled, small but genuine. You'd make a good commander. Chun smirked. You make a terrible subordinate. They both laughed softly, the sound cutting through the rain. Before parting, Chun handed her a small flash drive. Found this during the investigation, she said. Drone footage from the operation. Thought you might want it. Voss turned it over in her hand, unmarked, simple. Thank you. Chun nodded. For what it's worth, people like you keep the rest of us honest. Then she turned and disappeared into the rain. Back in her quarters, Voss set the flash drive beside Brennan's envelope. For a long moment she just stared at both, the symbols of two worlds she couldn't quite belong to, truth and duty, both paid for in silence. She opened the envelope first. Inside was a handwritten letter and a single patch, her unit insignia, but the border had been stitched in gold thread. The letter read, "You were right to disobey. That's not something the military likes to put in writing, but I wanted it said somewhere that mattered. There are rules that keep the system intact and rules that keep it human. When those conflict, only one deserves your loyalty. Don't let them convince you that silence is order. It never was. Brennan." She folded the letter carefully, then picked up the flash drive, plugged it into her laptop. The footage flickered to life, drone camera, thermal overlay. She watched herself on the ridge during the firefight, still, precise, steady under chaos. Her rifle flashed with each heartbeat. Around her, explosions lit up the jungle, yet her movements never faltered. But it wasn't the action that caught her breath. It was the ending. The drone's camera panned up after the battle, the ridge, the smoke, the convoy below. And there, amid the wreckage, 12 men stood together, alive. One of them, Hayes, looked up toward the ridge, raising a hand in silent salute. For a long time, Voss just watched. Then she whispered, "You made it home." She closed the laptop, the image burning behind her eyes. Days later, she stood on a pier overlooking the gray expanse of the Pacific. Her duffel rested at her feet. A faint breeze tugged at her hair, carrying the salt and memory of too many departures. She signed the papers that morning, indefinite leave reassignment pending. It wasn't discharge, not yet, just a breath between lives. A fishing boat moved across the horizon, small against the water. She envied its simplicity, forward, steady, no mission briefings or ghosts to answer to. But deep down, she knew she'd never belong to stillness. A voice echoed behind her, "Thought I'd missed you." It was Captain Malik, out of uniform now, wearing a plain jacket, hands in pockets. "You didn't," she said. He joined her at the railing. For a while neither spoke. The waves did the talking. "I heard you're leaving," he said finally. For a while she replied, "Quantico? Maybe, haven't decided." He nodded. "Well, wherever you go, the rest of us are better because you were here." She smiled faintly. "You always were good at speeches." He chuckled, "Not really, just honest." They stood there until the sun broke through, not bright, just enough to turn the water gold. Then she turned to him. "You think it ever ends, the noise, the memories?" He looked at the horizon. "No, but it gets quieter when you stop running from it." She thought about that for a moment. Then she said softly, "Maybe that's enough." He nodded once, then extended his hand. "Take care of yourself, Voss." "You too, Captain." They shook hands, brief, firm, final. Then she picked up her duffel and started walking down the pier, her boots thudding softly against the old wood. Halfway down, she stopped and looked back. Malik stood where she'd left him, watching. She raised a hand, a silent farewell. He returned it. Then she kept walking, until the sea swallowed the sound of her steps. That night her voice would become the narrator's, calm, grounded, reflective, carrying the moral of everything she'd lived through. They'll tell you obedience keeps you safe. That silence keeps the world in order. But I've seen what happens when good people follow bad orders. The cost isn't measured in medals. It's measured in ghosts. So if you ever find yourself staring down a choice between what's right and what's written, remember this. Paper doesn't bleed. People do. A pause, the wind rises. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The screen would fade to black, the sound of ocean waves merging with the slow pulse of a heartbeat, steady, human, unbroken.